Good morning, everybody. I'm in a good place. I'm in a good mood this morning, and I want to welcome you to the Community of the Wild Goose. Got a little what we call at the Community of the Wild Goose, not announcements, but goose droppings. So got a few goose droppings to lay on you, lay on you here. All right. First of all, I got to go by my nudges, inner nudges. I think that's how spirit works. You get these little inner nudges. And I think I'm really super close to wanting to gather together in person in a safe, socially distanced, but near one another. I think I'm getting real close and real ready. So in preparation for that, I've got a few things that I'd like to share with you. Just throw out there. If something hits you, it sinks, it falls in a welcoming spot in your heart. Just go ahead and respond to me. Call me or email me. Let me know what your thoughts are. The first one is, I'm not sure we're going to be meeting at the North Mountain Visitor Center when we do meet. It could be in somebody has a big giant backyard or something for in the meantime where we can get some space and I can speak. You know how loud I can speak. I think I can handle the outdoors. I don't know if we're going to take a little reservation so that we know we can control the number of people to keep it safe for everybody. Not really sure. But if we do have to rent a room, we're going to need to kind of replenish of some of the money that was there from the coffee cup in the back for donuts and coffee. So since we might not be providing coffee and donuts, everybody will bring in their own. If you would be willing to donate to be able to pay for a room for us to meet in, we have very low overhead. I do not take a salary. We do not have paid staff for Community Wild Goose. We are a nonprofit 501c3. You can go to the website at communityofthewildgoose.org, communityofthewildgoose.org, or on the Facebook page, and you'll see a place to donate. And when you donate through that PayPal spot, it'll come up not as Community of the Wild Goose. It'll come up as Grace Community Incorporated as the name that they graciously gave. That group graciously gave us their 501c3. And we are operating as Community of the Wild Goose, but you're not giving to some church named Grace Community or something else. It is the Community of the Wild Goose. But if you feel like that's something you'd want to do, feel free to do that. And it also serves to help in some scholarship roles for people who might need something in the area of recovery, those kinds of things. So it will always go outward. And in service, there's no staff, nothing other than the natural operations. Community of the Wild Goose account pays for the equipment that I've been using to be able to broadcast through here and keep these things going. So that has just been really awesome. So Wild Goose followers have been the ones who have been able to do that, and we're going to continue to do that. I really hope that we can meet in person in a safe, socially distanced way. And I think we know that there's ways to do that. And hopefully I'll get vaccinated soon too, and you will too. Also on Instagram, Henry Rojas / I know there's another Instagram called CWG, Community Wild Goose Flies Free, but people thought it was an airline. So I've been doing the broadcast on Henry Rojas _, which is the line on the bottom, Henry Rojas _. Feel free to join me on my Wake Ups with Henry on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, which is just a call to contemplative life, not the actual contemplative practice. So an encouragement and inspiration to do your contemplative practices, to stay aware and to stay awake. And that's on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 a.m. Bright, on the nose, sharp 7 a.m. or 7:05. So depending on whether my coffee was finished brewing or not. Actually, last time I brewed it right on the air. So, but please feel free to grab your coffee and join in. Happy Valentine's Day, Cousin Rini and Holly and Irma and Sharon. It's good to see you. Let's see. Another thing. I need somebody who is a digital technology genius. And I say that because with what I do, and my mind, which is not genius, I need a genius next to me to make it look good. If there's anybody who would be willing to volunteer their time that is super great at understanding how to operate Zoom retreats, hosting, we have the mechanism, I've got the cameras, I've got everything we need. But I need somebody who would be able to monitor that. My nightmare on Christmas Eve that sounds like it was a mass murder. It was really hit me hard when I realized I'm trying to do a lot of things I'm not very good at. And I wanted so bad to have that Christmas Eve service. And once we got up, I realized that the host had been switched from me to someone else. And I had tons of people texting me saying they can't get on. I don't want to have that happen again. I need to have somebody who knows what they're doing, who believes and feels passionate about some of the things I'm sharing, what the Community of the Wild Goose is all about. And I want 2 specific retreats to happen on a regular basis. And it would be accessible for the common person and the professional, the therapist and the patient, the pastor and the parishioner, or whatever we call them, to talk about changing how we're talking about God in relation to belong, believe, behave, that which I've been teaching for so many years. I really want to be able to start doing that and getting it out beyond that. The human condition, what it really means in this process of transformation and how we rise above that human condition that we have, but at the same time, accept our humanity. And finally, the body, soul, and spirit work that I did a retreat with Spirit in the Desert not too long ago. I'm seeing the real need for that. I keep hearing people are having mental health issues. I believe those mental health issues, yes, but we also have a soul issue because what we're comfortable with and what we're used to is being snatched away from us. And it might mean that those attachments have been the problem, that our identities have been wrapped into those things. So gave you a lot to think about. So please feel free to email me at henry@henryrojas.com or HR for Henry Rojas, HR lifestory@gmail.com, either one. So please feel free to do that. And if that doesn't work, just do a investigation of Finder on me and get my address and phone number, and you'll figure out how to get a hold of me. All right. We're going to begin this morning and talk about, it's Valentine's Day. And I didn't even think about that because I don't exactly have a Valentine. All I know is it's a very hallmarkish thing. I never was that much into Valentine's Day anymore, even though I'm kind of a romantic. I am just not into Valentine's Day, but I don't know how you feel about that. But as I was doing the message for today, I just realized this is kind of a romantic message that I'm talking about. More like God's romance with us. I know that sounds hokey. I know. Cheers. But it's so true. And I want to talk about this I was going to look at the story of the Transfiguration in Mark 4 because it fell on the Advent calendar of today's liturgy. I actually never made it to that. I kind of got stuck in the beginning of Mark 4 before the Transfiguration. So this is not about the Transfiguration. And I'm calling it Dancing with God. I want to start first by telling a story that Brennan Manning told in his book. I believe it was in Ragamuffin Gospel or in Ruthless Trust. I'm not sure. But he talked about how he was doing this retreat. And nobody really spoke of grace as eloquently as Brennan Manning. And he was talking about this retreat and this intimacy. And one of the nuns that was at his retreat was taking notes. And in her quiet time, she was very diligent and she did the practices well. And Brennan Manning says that she has this grimace look on her face and was struggling the entire time as she was doing her practices, go back to her room, go into solitude, go into prayer, do all of her practices. And she expressed that to Brennan Manning. She just wasn't feeling what he was talking about. And the last night of the retreat, she goes to Brennan and she says, very emotionally, she says, I have a dream to share with you that I had last night. She says, I dreamt that I was sitting in a chair and Jesus walked up to me in my dream and asked me to dance. And she says, I was so stunned and shocked, but I refused. I didn't want to. I felt like it was below him to dance with him. It was not honoring. And she wanted to stick to her guns that it would not be honoring to dance with him, even though in her dream he was inviting her and inviting her and inviting her. And then she realized she was refusing Jesus. And if he was asking her to do something that was beyond what was in her thinking and her theology and her way, maybe she ought to do it. And off they went. And Fred and Ginger, Jesus and the nun, and they began to dance. And she said the more she danced with Jesus, the more free she felt in her dream. Such a beautiful story that Brennan Manning tells. And I think that that's the way things are sometimes, is that we are being invited all the time into an intimacy with God. I feel like I've been invited into a deeper intimacy with God. And just as a quick update with my own health situation, I spiked the ball in the end zone in the first surgery that I had for my bladder cancer. He got everything that he could see, and we began to think it's over. And 30 days after 6 weeks of chemo, found out that he sees something more, and I'll find out more about that on the 16th. But you know what? There's an intimacy that has grown in my relationship with God that I don't think could have occurred without this. These life situations, he didn't cause it to happen, but he's using it in such a beautiful way for me. Scary. I'm feeling all the things that maybe you have felt in your own fears and in your own life. And I'm telling you this very upbeat this morning. There's very downbeat moments, as we all have. But we're not alone in this. Together, we share in each other's sufferings. And I got an email from this woman in the UK who was also a patient. And she, because it was a site that I went to where people were talking about these things, because there's so much fear and not knowing and wondering, and you just know. And she told me her story, and it was so encouraging. And I realized the great position that I'm in, and I feel great. And I really don't have an ambition to try to beat something or overcome something. It's living the life that I have in the fullest that it can. I am so far a disastrous place in the cancer that I have. It is manageable. It is manageable and workable. But I don't want to ever spike the ball in the end zone anymore and say I'm cancer free the way I posted and everything, because you know what? None of us know. None of us know. That's not a pessimistic stance. It's looking at life's realities and then adapting to realize that the life we have is worth loving. Not necessarily worth living. It's worth loving and embracing and taking every aspect of it. So, Sunday from now or 2 Sundays, I might be in a different emotional state. But today, I feel encouraged. I feel hopeful, and I am so gracious for what I'm learning and for the life that I have. And I hope that's just. I don't want it to be an inspiration. I just want it to be a shared experience. If you can relate to that, feel free to let me know about that too, and where you are in that, and we hold these things together. All right. Even if it's a Valentine's Day heartbreak, even if it's a heartbreak you're going through, it doesn't mean that you don't talk to somebody who's got cancer because, they've got, no. The big C word is much overblown. I'm realizing heartache and somebody else's cancer, if they're shared together, we share these things. Now we can manage the suffering together, no matter how deep, no matter how difficult. All right. So I began in this embracing of the life that we have, following Brennan and the nun. And last week I talked about allowing Dad to make the pancakes. My dad would sit my brother, when I got older, set me up on the counter while they made pancakes. I wasn't putting the ingredients in. I wasn't making things, but I got to watch how Dad's working at making the pancakes. Once in a while, I'd let me flip very awkwardly. But the bottom line is we let God do his work. And I want to open with this beautiful psalm that I remember singing in the Well, a coffee house, back in the 70s during the Jesus movement. And it came to me this morning when I was talking to my daughter, and it's, and the words are this, a little King Jamesy, but the Psalms always sounds really cool in King James language, right? Thou hast turned my mourning, mourn. Thou hast turned my mourning into dancing for me. Thou hast put off my sackcloth. That's where they used to sit and throw ashes and lament and take the period of 7 days or whatever it was to just be in that suffering. But there's a time of coming out. Thou hast turned my mourning into dancing for me. Thou hast put off my sackcloth. Thou hast turned my mourning into dancing for me and girded me with gladness. Early in the morning, I'll sing praise unto thee and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give thanks unto thee forever. My alcoholic and drug addict friends, you guys are so right about the gratitudes. That the gratitudes, the byproduct of gratitude is joy. Joy it's not the other way around. It's not the other way around, right? We don't get joy and then we become grateful. We begin to speak of our gratitudes even when we're not feeling it, and that joy will follow as a byproduct. In Mark 4, Jesus is, up until then, he's speaking in the synagogues. He's speaking in the structures. And he moves outside of the synagogues and the structures and in the rigid theologies of that time, and he moves to the lakesides. And he doesn't speak in harsh scriptural tone. He speaks in parables. Isn't that interesting? He makes this movement into that. And he pairs these parables with natural experiences. So he moves into new places. Don't we feel like we go into new places and it just shudders us? It just shakes us to the core when we go into new places. And then he chose things that people around him were very familiar with. And he presented them as, listen to what Barclay says about that and how he moved into, he presented them with truth, which if they would make the right effort and in the right frame of mind, they could consider for themselves. Now, I want to stop on that one phrase, the right effort and the right frame of mind. That doesn't mean the right belief and nailing it in your understanding in the right. It means the right effort and right way, which is to be open and aware. It's to let go and create an environment that is receptive, like the seed that goes into the soil. You have to prepare the soil and make it a welcoming and fertile place for the seed to be placed. It doesn't matter how great a seed it is, if the soil beneath is rock solid and unwelcoming. It doesn't make any difference if it is stone and skeptical and indifferent. It doesn't matter if it's even fertile, but it's around an environment that are naysayers. We create the soil and the environment and the receptivity of something that is beyond my ability to control. Okay, let me repeat that again. We create a receptive environment to let that occur, which I cannot do with my own power. All right. Actually, I use different words, but it's the same thing. All right. So let me start again with Barclay's words. He presented them with truth, which, if they would make the right effort and in the right frame of mind, they could discover it for themselves and therefore possess it in a way that made it really and truly their own. And then he started from a thing that was happening. And at that moment on earth, in order to lead people's thoughts to heaven, what is that? That which occurs in the kingdom where God is king, not where my own fears and thoughts are king. See, that's the movement I'm going through. That's the movement we can globally go through and in community with the pandemic. Thinking and considering our circumstances, our isolation, our difficulty, think on these things again. And I'll repeat that. He started from a thing that was happening at the moment on earth in order to lead people's thoughts to heaven. As N.T. Wright describes, that thin line between heaven and earth. He started from something which all people could see to get to the things that are invisible. He started from something which all men knew to get something which they had never as yet realized. That was the very essence of Jesus's teaching. He did not bewilder men by starting with things which were strange and abstruse and involved. He started with the simplest things that even a child could understand. And finally, by so doing, Jesus showed that he believed that there was a real kinship between earth and heaven. Jesus would not, you know what? I got to stop right there and just say something real quick. This talk about the mental health issue with teens, children, families, it's so true about what is happening in our isolation and whatever. But I'm hearing that more from the adults than I'm hearing it from the children and teens. And then I hear it more from children and teens. Think about the process. If we as adults don't do our work, our inner work, our understanding of our attachments to institutions and things and belief systems, if we don't do our own work, it will spill over into the children that we lead. And we will project onto them our own fears. I am the poster child for projecting my own fears onto my dear children in my younger years and in their younger years. And then we got a lot of work to do after that, a lot of reprogramming, or a lot of rethinking. But instead of focusing so much on what children are going through, perhaps we need to go and see what we are going through and what attachments we have created that are causing us the distress that we are unwilling to look at. Look at our own circumstances that we might be an example on how to get through difficult times. that we don't fall prey to the idea of doom and gloom, that we are honest with our feelings and our sufferings, but that we give a pattern, a way out, like crumbs in the forest, breadcrumbs in the forest to help somebody else come out. We have to do our work as adults. If we don't do our work, how can we be setting a path and a way for our children to know how to work through difficult times? That they too might be able to be strong for their own children and honest and authentic. Okay? All right. Back to Barclay. So by Jesus speaking about the things that were relevant, that were right there before him, that people could understand, by so doing this, Jesus showed that he believed that there was a real kinship between earth and heaven. Jesus would not have agreed that earth was a desert drear. He believed that in the ordinary, common, everyday things of life, people could see God. As William Temple put it, Jesus taught men to see the operation of God in the regular and the normal, in the rising of the sun and the falling of the rain and the growth of the plant. How beautiful to realize that it's right under our nose, right under our nose. It's right there. I was thinking about my son Josh shared with me a little video of this guru who was telling his people, and I'm so not going to say this very eloquently. You'll have to look it up on YouTube. If I know I was going to say something about it, I would have provided it for you. But this man is saying that, you know, when our own breath smells, oftentimes we can't tell that our own breath smells, and we will look for others to let us know. And we're at the mercy on whether they really would or not. And yet our nose is right above our mouth. You'd think we'd be able to smell it. We'd think we'd be able to sense what stinks about our own life, about what is going on, about my own behavior, right? But instead, we project it. The smell's coming from somewhere else. No, it's coming from right here, and it's right under your nose. That was a huge enlightening thing for me. Wow, we really do need to work on ourselves. So God speaks in new ways. Does he speak in new ways, or are new ways happening and you don't see God inviting you through those new ways? He speaks in wise and adventurous ways. Why? Because we go into a place of uncertainty. What is occurring that God might be speaking and trying to speak through to you through your circumstances? Instead of thinking that God is placing these circumstances there, or that he is the cosmic social worker that's going to remove them from your world, what is Spirit speaking through these? Here's some ways to recognize if what you're experiencing is an opportunity for deeper intimacy with the invisible. It might be unfamiliar. It might be uncomfortable. Right? I always tell my directees that are in recovery, if you're heading down a place that feels unfamiliar, if you've chosen a path that is unfamiliar and it creates a little bit disturbance, you're going the right way. If the way you're going is very familiar, you're probably going the wrong way. All right? The second thing is that it may attempt to get all of your preoccupation instead of your attention. You know that feeling? When your thoughts and everything about it and the circumstances, you dwell and you dwell and you dwell and you play out the scenarios, and it becomes a preoccupation. The mistake would be to go into denial and act as though that it's not occurring or that you're not suffering really. All right? But the invitation is to pay attention to it, not to be preoccupied with it. To pay attention to it, to honor those disturbances, the upset, and together. See, we're afraid that if we give attention to them, that we will go out of control with it. It'll overwhelm us. But I think we become overwhelmed with it anyway, instead of asking it, what are you trying to tell me? Distress, disturbance? Because then you can find out what you need, and it's the opportunity for Spirit to come to us like a parable of our own experience. It may feel like a threat to your desire to be right, or to be enough, or to be in control. It might be that when you understand it, it is so precious, you wonder how you could learn this, or have done this, grown in this, without that very experience of unfamiliarity and uncertainty and discomfort. And I hear that all the time with drugs and alcohol. And in many of my own experiences, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. And yet, for some strange reason, I'm glad it happened. Why? Because we're invited into this dance with God in our circumstances. God forbid we should wait for the best dance floor when we should dance with the shoreline, with the horizon, with the unknown, with the beauty of nature, with the face of God and children that are just knuckleheads and beautiful. How do we begin this new experience of this mystery we call God that engages us in the dance of human life, this invitation? How do we do that? We do it by letting go. We do it by recognizing that the parables were to dislodge our old way of thinking and open ourselves up to a new way of thinking. It's by setting on a new path that is separate from my rigid, concrete beliefs about myself and even my theological beliefs to enter into a new place. Why do we do that? Because so many times our theology, the way we think about God or had thought about God, is not matching up with the experience of this life. And when it's not, please don't listen to the legalists that say it's because you're doing something wrong. It might be an invitation that God is doing something right, because it's not fitting into my finite understanding and it has to go into a new understanding. So you're feeling that unfamiliarity, and then you have this enlightenment. The image of it is baptism then. Baptism not being that I am marked with the enter the dance floor because I've got the neon stamp on the back of my hand, and now I can show it under the black light and get back into the dance. It's an understanding that, like the nun, she was no longer dancing for God in her legalistic practices and attempts to please God and get his applause, but she was being invited in that moment outside of her belief system. What felt slightly scandalous, and that romance of that dream of Jesus inviting her to dance, regardless of what the laws and rules said about what you're supposed to do with a dream of Jesus. And she gave herself to that. So the baptism and the surrender is not to become a part of. So whether the baptism is done or not, there is an inner surrender to the life that we have instead of the life that we thought we needed to have. And we embrace it with everything. And when we do that, we do the next thing is we begin to move away from our attachments. The attachment that we had, whether it be with a person or a church organization, or even the community of the wild goose, that it became your identity. See, even though I am the leader, the speaker, the president on the .org, if I allow Community of the Wild Goose institution, organization to become my identity, then it loses its purpose of what it is that we are doing. That's why we serve these things, but they do not become a part of us. I was talking to my brother-in-law yesterday about that, and we were talking about retirement. And one of the things that I've realized that is so helpful to realize when we leave a lifelong position is that I made that job. It did not make me. When I was the gorilla for the Phoenix Suns, once I stopped, if I decided not to go out and I just took the costume and threw it out on the court, I guarantee you it's not going to dance on its own. And if it did, it would freak a lot of people out. It did not make me. I made it. And I take those same things that I was made with and created with, and I can do them, whether it is as a chef or it is as a speaker, as it is a teacher, as whatever it is that you do, you take those qualities to the next thing, but it does not make you. You make it, and you put your vocation on it. It does not put your identity on you. I hope you grab onto that. I hope that frees you. I hope it, you know what? If something I say or somebody else says and it feels like you breathe a little better, it's kind of like you get another hole in the lid of your bug jar of your life. Oh, it's so freeing to be able to experience that. And you begin to move away from those attachments of those thinkings, the way that you were thinking. In therapy, for cognitive behavioral therapy, for modification for emotional regulation, you are changing your thoughts to believe that you belong, not trying to belong like baptism to get into something. You are receptive to receiving that God has already said you belong, and this is a confession of this truth that you belong. And then we begin to recognize the development of our identity by association. Kind of like what I just said, our association with a particular politics or our churches or our philosophy or our fears and how they defined us, our storyline. What are some of those things for you that have become attachments? And you know how you know they're attachments? You wonder if you can live without them. What if I let go of this idea or this thought or this piece of theology? How would I live without it? The question then becomes, how are you living with it? If it became your identity and it was sucking life out of you and you didn't even know it. If our faith, our religious practices are nothing more than a dance to entertain God and win his applause or his favor or his reward, then we are not dancing with the divine. We are dancing for the divine, or worse, we are dancing alone. Why? Because the God we've created in our head, or the God we experienced in love initially, it morphed into a God that must be entertained. And that God that we created in our head, or that must be entertained, I don't believe it exists. See, that's what I believe atheists do. And I love them because they have let go of that objectifying of God that we as Christians often did in American society. We made Jesus man of the year, put him on a bumper sticker, dressed him up in nice clothes, instead of seeing him in the least of these, in spirit. We must, as Jesus did, find new ways to experience and understand God and move out of the cathedrals of our making, the synagogues of our duty, the relationships of our confinement, and the devotions of our performances, and into the communing nature with God by the lakeside, in the faces of the children we love, in the paths of uncertainty. May we find God in the mystery of the unfamiliar, of the mundane, of the what is, and not the fog of the despair of what is not. May we experience, as Merton says, the paradoxical response to an almost incomprehensible call from God, drawing us into solitude, plunging us into darkness and silence, not to withdraw and protect us from peril, but to bring us safely through the untold dangers by a miracle of love and power. You guys, imagine yourself at a really cool club and you're going in to dance. You're not sure if you really belong. And there's a bouncer at the door of the entry. And the doorway is the freedom into the dance with God instead of the dance for God. Well, may the bouncer at the door of that freedom where we dance with God, other known as our ego and our need to be in control, pull back the red velvet barrier and let us enter into this dance with God. On our life, the dance floor that is, not the thing we think we don't belong to. Thou hast turned my mourning into dancing for me. Thou hast put off my sackcloth. Thou hast turned my mourning into dancing for me and girded me with gladness. Early in the morning I will sing praises unto him and not keep silent. O Lord my God, I will sing praises unto you forever. Amen.